Good morning, friends. Welcome to the first lecture of History Static course for Prelims 2018. So, just like we did in polity, we will be doing smart wording or what is called as smart study. So, there are two approaches to read for this exam because the syllabus of this exam is very wide, right? You have everything under the sun on which a question could be asked in the exam. And there are two approaches. One is where you do hard work. You study 14 hours a day, and there is no guarantee that even after studying 14 hours a day, you get through the prelims exam. And the strategy is smart strategy or smart study. Smart study is where you kind of study smartly. You analyze the trends and then you focus more on those areas where the UPSC has been asking questions, and you focus less on other areas where UPSC has not been asking questions in last 6-7 years. So what I have did, I have analyzed like last 7 years paper of UPSC and the kind of questions they are asking in the history or in the history exam, because one thing is that the majority of questions asked in the exam are from modern history, and that will be our focus in this lecture. And they are not asking from each and every chapter of NCERT or Grover or Bipin Chandra. So first of all, let me tell you about my background. I have an opportunity of scoring highest marks in history mains in 2013. In 2013, I scored highest marks not in 2014. I scored 283 marks. When you compare it with last year paper, then this is a decent marks, but in those years, you never used to get so high marks. I mean, maximum marks in history optional used to be 260, 265. So 283 was an extraordinary marks. So it is some of my interest also, and I have experience also, and I have experienced that in never my prelims exam I've never marked any history question wrong. So from my experience, I will use all my experience in this lecture to focus or to make you study only those areas which I feel are important for the exam perspective. So I have done a thorough analysis and I have found that on these following topics, UPSC has been asking questions in last 6 or 7 years. So in this lecture, in the first part of the lecture, I'll be telling you which areas you should focus on, and in the next part, I'll be discussing the early conquest of British in India plus the economic policy of British government in India. So we'll start with the areas where we should focus. So first area where we should focus is British land. So I would say there are two kinds of topics. One topic which are very important, where the trend or where the questions are being asked, and then after this I will I will tell you areas which you should read very briefly. Like you should not waste much time on that. So first is British land revenue system. UPSC has been asking questions on permanence, settlement, Jyotwali, Mahalwali. Second topic is economy of British India. And this includes grain theory, commercialization of agriculture, development of railways, decline of handicrafts, deindustrialization of India. Third is pre-Congress organization. Pre-Congress Political organization. So here we have organizations like Jamidar Association, East India Organization, India League, Bengal British India Society. So a question could be asked that who is the founder or which leader is associated with that, or what is the motive of this particular. Mostly they ask about the leaders which are associated with this pre-Congress association. Next we have is constitutional development process in India. These include 1773 Act, Pitt's India Act, 1813 Act, 1891 Act, Morley-Minto, Montagu-Kempsford 35 Act, Indian Independence Act. So all these constitutional development acts come under this heading. Next we have is committee and commissions. So this is very important because somehow last year they asked a question on Butler Committee. There are around 15 to 20 committees which you should remember, and I will be discussing all these committees in the lecture. Next is important acts other than Constitutional Development Act. And this includes acts like Trade Dispute Bill, Factory Act. Last year they asked two questions on this. Factory asked a question on Factory Act, and then they asked a question on Trade Dispute Bill. Hilbert Bill, Vernacular Press Act, Arms Act, Famine Code, Rowlatt Act. So these are also very important for the exam. Next is rise of modern nationalism in India. And this could be divided into two phases. First is pre-Gandhian phase, and second is Gandhian phase. Next we have is important satyagrahas. So in UPSC, I don't think they have asked in last 5 years, but in CAPF, which is the level of paper of CAPF is more or less equal to UPSC prelims, they asked this question 2-3 years back, where they asked which was the Gandhiji's first satyagraha, and it was not Champaran, it was in South Africa, in Johannesburg. He had his first satyagraha. So next we have is important satyagrahas associated with the freedom movement. Then you have this rise of left in India's freedom struggle. So they asked 2 years back about, 2 or 3 years back about Congress Socialist Party. A question could be asked on these conspiracy cases like Meerut conspiracy case, Kanpur conspiracy case. We will be discussing that in the lectures. Next we have is social and cultural reformers in British India. So this is actually, we can divide that into reformist and revivalist. These are people like Arya Samaj, example. They have people like Brahma Samaj. So here we'll be discussing on these important social reformers, their sayings, and whatever the name of the organizations. So here the focus will be on that. Next we have is, again this is very important for your exam, which is important personalities and its associated organization, movements, and newspaper. So they asked last year about Kesav Chandra Sen, which organization she was associated with. So there are around 30-40 personalities where we will be dealing in our lectures, and we will be dealing about the name of the personality, associations associated with that personality, the movement he was associated with, and if he has any newspapers. These are trivial areas where every year they ask one or two questions. So it's not good, they will ask one question on that. Next we have is road to independence. This is again very important. So here we will discuss things which are the important developments which have taken place after since the onset of World War II. So here we include others of Cripps mission, Wavell mission, Cabinet mission. So these things all these, Rajgopalacharya plan, Desai Liaquat plan. So all these informal plans also we will be discussing here. Next we have is important Governor General. And key events during their tenure. Next we have is revolutionary organizations in India. So mostly they ask questions from the freedom struggle, 1857 to 1947. Generally, most of the aspirants, what they do is that they read modern history since the death of Aurangzeb. But I have never seen them asking questions on areas of 18th century. Generally, they ask questions from 1857 to 1947. If we talk of political angle, but yes, they ask question on economy. Even the economy of 19th century and late 18th century also they ask. And when we talk of political movements, they generally ask on 1850 from 1857 to 1947. So our focus should be mostly on that. So this is revolution. We have pre-socialist organization, pre-socialist phase, and we have socialist phase, where we have people like Bhagat Singh, Subhash Chandra Bose, Surya Sen, Ghadar Party. Next we have is tribal and peasants movement in 19th and 20th century. Next, here we include all movements like Bardoli, Deccan Riot, Vibhaga movement, all these things Indigo Revolt, all these things we include here. Next we have is 1857 Revolt. This is a separate chapter in itself. Next we have is educational developments in British India. Next we have is temple entry movements in India. Next we have is British administration in India. And this includes services like civil service, army, police, all these things are under this. Then we have areas which you can read briefly, and these includes establishment of British rule in India. So for those people who are reading it for the first time, you should definitely read that. But for someone who is a veteran, who is well aware with history, you should skip this chapter for the pre-exam. For the mains exam, you have to read this chapter. This is very important. But for the prelims exam, you can skip this chapter. Here we have wars like Carnatic Wars, Battle of Plassey, Battle of Buxar, Anglo-Mysore War, the rise of Marathas, Battle of Anipat III, annexation of Punjab, annexation of Sindh. You can read it, you can just briefly read it. You can avoid annexation of Punjab and Sindh. You can avoid the Marathas. You can read about Battle of Plassey, Battle of Buxar. You can briefly read Carnatic Wars also, right? Rest you can ignore for your prelims exam. So we'll start with the first chapter, which is establishment of British rule in India. So, when Farrukh Shiar was ruling, he gave a farman to the British that the British can trade inside the Mughal territory without paying any taxes, right? They gave this farman to East India Company that you can for your company trade, you can trade inside the Mughal territory without paying any taxes, and that's why we are giving you this thing known as Dastaks, which is a royal certificate which they would show and they would be exempted from paying any taxes. So what really happened was that by 1750s, the Bengal Nawab till 1740s and 50s, they were strong. So when they were strong, they used to keep this British or this East India Company under control. But in early 1750s, the weakness in the Bengal court came into the forefront. The last strong or independent ruler of Bengal was Siraj-ud-Daulah. And he was a hot-headed man. He was what you call as Oriental despot. It was a term used by the British that all the Asian and all the Ottoman, they were being ruled by Oriental despot who was ruling without any constitution. Because at that time, in many of these European countries, the rulers were ruling with a constitution, especially in Britain. In Britain, after the Magna Carta, the king was always, his power was always limited with what you call as the constitution. But in case of the East, most of the rulers were technically, if they feel that person is not right, or that person is somehow made him angry, he would just give a kind of a farman, that beheading, right? It was like completely on his whims and fantasies to take any kind of decision, right? So that is why the term Oriental despot was used. So Siraj-ud-Daulah was an ideal Oriental despot and he was technically hot-headed. Plus, when he came to power, the opposition people or the other brothers, they were not happy. Some of the nobles in his court were not happy with his behavior. So somehow there was this disturbance or internal disturbance within the court. And the British knew that very well. British knew that at that time it was Robert Clive. He knew it very well that there are some internal, disruptions in the court. And by that time, the English East India Company, they were feeling that without having a say on the political power, they cannot have or they cannot profit economically. Because at that time they had competition with French East India Company, and that is how they faced war also in South India, which was known as Carnatic Wars. So somehow they were not very happy. They were not very, so they wanted that without a same political power, they cannot prosper economically. Therefore, they were thinking of the way where they could enhance their political power or they can enhance their say in the kingdom of Bengal. Because at that time, Bengal was a very rich kingdom. You had Muslims, you had textiles there, very fine print textiles, which used to be exported to the a large number of countries like Europe and other countries. So there were a number of factors which were responsible for clash of last independent Nawab Shiraji Dowla with the Britishers or the East India Company. Firstly, there were economic factors. There were economic factors and there were political factors. So when we talk of economic factors, we have already discussed about the Farman or Dastak which the East India Company got from the Mughal Emperor. But the problem was that the British or the East India Company were misusing that Farman because they used to give that Farman to the Indian traders and they also used that Farman for undertaking private trade, right? Because that Farman was only given to East India Company as a whole. If some employee of East India Company is doing some private trade, then he will have to pay tax. That was very clear in that Farman, right? You can only use it for the company trade. But many private East India Company servants were misusing that. They were using that Farman, they were using that Hastaks to evade tax. Similarly, the East India Company was giving these Hastaks to Indian traders for some money, and then Indian traders also were using that Hastaks to evade taxes, and that was causing a big loss to the revenue or to the treasury of the Bengal Nawabs, and therefore naturally he felt hesitant. So he kind of told them that you should stop doing this, but even after saying that, the East India Company was somehow ignoring his suggestion or his order. Second factor which led to this thing is, first was a Dastak issue. Second was that the Britishers or the East India Company realized that we cannot, or the empire, or we cannot trade successfully without having a say in the politics of the politics of the Bengal. And Bengal at that time was very, very economically rich province. So second reason was mixing politics with economics. And what were the political factors or what were the political reasons. So the Nawab had already told the Britishers that you can have your establishment or factory in Calcutta, but you cannot fortify that, because fortifying means that you are somehow challenging the absolute power of the Nawab. Therefore, the Nawab prohibited them from fortification. But the East India Company, who thought that they had become very powerful, they somehow ignored the advice of the Nawab, and they fortified their factory. Next we have is what we have already discussed earlier, that there were many interviews against him. Thirdly, the political opponent of Sirajuddaula was given asylum by the East India Company, and naturally Sirajuddaula would not like that. Next we have is what happened in the war. So actually the major part of the army of Nawab did not participate in the war, because the governor general, the army chief of Nawab, Mir Jafar, he was somehow bought by Robert Clive. Most of the important bankers of Calcutta were brought by Robert Clive by paying them bribes. Many of the important commanders of Nawab's army were also bought by Robert Clive. So it was technically not a battle, because somehow very few people died in the battle, as majority of the army of Nawab did not fight, and therefore Sirajuddaula was replaced by Mir Jafar. Mir Jafar is called as Gaddar-e-Azam in Bangladesh, because they considered him as the first traitor which led to establishment of British rule in the Indian subcontinent. So he was replaced by Mir Jafar. So what was the significance of Battle of Plassey? So first we have is economic significance, and second is political significance. So when we talk of economic significance, after this war, the new Nawab, the British or the prestige of the British increased significantly, and they got undisputed right to free trade in the Bengal area. Because now the new Nawab came to power with the help of British, right? So naturally he would not be in a condition to somehow disallow the demands of the East India Company. So they got unlimited right to trade, or unlimited right to free trade. Secondly, the new Nawab gave them 22.5 million between 1757 to 1760. And they also got new jamidari of many areas in Bengal. It's not important for the exam, so you can ignore it. Secondly, it also opened the gates for drain of wealth and corruption and exploitation of Bengal, because nowadays, earlier older Nawab was somehow he used to check these misuse of Tusks. But the new Nawab was somehow in a mood to give favors to the East India Company, ignored any kind of misuse which was taking place at that time. So a lot of these private traders of East India Company, they earned wealth like hell. They were called as Nabobs in England because they were living like they took a lot of money from India and they went to Britain, and they were living a very feudal life where they were having servants, they were having these mansions. So that is why they were called as Nabobs, which is somehow anglicized version of Nawabs. And what was the political significance of this battle? So it definitely increased the prestige of the East India Company in India. And now they would be considered as an important power of India. But somehow Battle of Plassey did not ended this question that who was the real master of Bengal. Because the Nawab, after Mir Jafar could not pay the Britishers out, could not satisfy the lust of the East India Company officials. Therefore, he was replaced by his, I would say, son-in-law, known as Mir Qasim. And Mir Qasim was an efficient ruler. And he thought that now that I have paid them these bribes and these, all these lands and everything, I paid them. Yeah? For their help, I paid them. Now their role should not be to tell me how should I govern. So somehow Battle of Plassey did not end in the question. And secondly, since the battle was won by treachery, it was not won by, with military superiority, that the British were more superior. Therefore, the Nawabs always knew that we are still more powerful than the British militarily, and therefore we are the real masters of Bengal. But the Britishers thought that since we have helped you to take power, therefore you are just a pawn, and we are the real masters of Bengal. So this question was left unanswered by Battle of Plassey, and that is why we had next battle, which was Battle of Buxar. So we will be. So let's move to the next battle, which actually decided this question that who was the real master of Bengal. So let's first discuss the factors which were responsible. So as we already have discussed earlier that Mir Qasim was a very, very efficient ruler, and he wanted to rule as an efficient or a independent ruler. Therefore, he shifted his capital from Calcutta to Munger. He shifted his capital from Murshidabad to Munger. He also tried to modernize his army. He tried to end corruption. He tried to bring in efficient system. So naturally, he knew that this question that who is the master of Bengal will be decided in next 5-6 years. Therefore, he was preparing for the war. While the Britishers, they did not also wanted the war because they felt that right now they are not so much militarily strong that they could afford a direct war with the Nawab. Therefore, they were also playing safe at that time. So there were these political questions, or there was this political reason, and there was this economic reasons which led to the war. So when we talk of political influence, the first was that the Battle of Plassey did not answer who is the master of Bengal. Secondly, the other rulers, because Battle of Buxar was fought between the East India Company and the Mughal Emperor Shah Alam. So Shah Alam there was this famous couplet about Shah Alam, that Shahe Alam, Raj Ars from Lal Kile se Palam, something like that. The Shah Alam means that you are emperor of the world, but the territory of Shah Alam is from Red Fort to Palam, which is a suburb in Delhi. That's how small his territory was at that time. So Shah Alam fought to restore the Mughal prestige. The Nawab of Lucknow, Shujatullah, he fought because he was promised by Mir Qasim that after the war you can take Bihar. And Shujatullah fought, the Mir Qasim fought to liberate himself from the British interference. What were the economic factors? So when we talk economic factors, the real reason was the issue of dastas. So there was this continuous misuse of dastas, and after being fed up with this misuse, Mir Qasim took this extreme destination or extreme decision. He abolished duties for everybody. So he said that if you the foreigners are getting this exemption on duties, well let me give this exemption to my own countrymen. Let it give to my own people. So he exempted duties altogether. But that was not accepted to the East India Company, because by that time they had grown very powerful and they could not accept equality between them and the French or the natives or the native Indians. Therefore they definitely resisted against that. So what were the circumstances which were leading to Battle of Buxar? So as we know that both of them avoided war, but some high-handed behavior on the part of British officials forced Mir Qasim to declare war against the East India Company. And what happened in the war? Well, in this war, the combined forces of Nawab of Bengal, Nawab of Awadh and the Mughal Emperor were defeated fiercely by the East India Company forces, and this was a direct battle. There was no kind of treachery, there was no kind of any intrigues and everything. It was a direct and fair battle, and the East India Company showed their military superiority over the Nawab, because they were fighting from bayonets and guns, and most of our army was fighting with swords, so naturally they would win, right? So after they won, it had led to following consequences or significance. It led to political and economic significance. So the first significance is political significance. So, Battle of Buxar solved this question: who was the master of Bengal? And it firmly established the East India Company as the real master of Bengal. But the problem was, it also somehow exposed the weaknesses of Indian powers. It led to the establishment of dual rule in Bengal. So after Mir Qasim got defeated, another member from the royal family was made to sit on the throne by the East India Company, but he was not given any power because that Nawab or from the Mughal Emperor Shah Alam the East India Company got Diwani rights for all the districts in Bengal. So Shah Alam actually did not have the power, but somehow the Mughal Empire had the prestige. Well, it did not have the power, but he had the prestige that if you got kind of farman from the Mughal Empire, that will have a psychological or economic impact on kind of people. So all the Diwani rights, what do we mean by the Diwani? It means revenue collection rights. So all the revenue collection was to be done by the East India Company, right? And all the Nizamat rights. What do we mean by Nizamat? It means administration. It means maintaining law and order. This was to be exercised by a deputy subedar, which would be called as deputy governor. And this deputy subedar was actually appointed by the Nawab on the advice of the East India Company. So even this power indirectly the East India Company used to exercise. So we have this kind of a thing where the British had the power without any responsibility because they enjoyed all the fruits. But when you talk when you talk of who is the face, it was the deputy subedar, while the Nawab had the responsibility without having any power. He used to be blamed by the common masses, but he was not the one who was calling shots. It was the East India Company who was calling the shots. So therefore it led to extreme plunder of Bengal. Extreme plunder. I mean, somehow people have written, some historians have written that never ever witnessed in history of the world that this kind of plunder, open plunder, would happen to a place. And many of the people who were more liberals, they even kind of shown very much contempt that we have destroyed a fine piece of land into complete misery and poverty. And this led, the consequences of this was also 1717 kind of famine. Because now, see, the only motive of the East India Company was to get profit. They hardly care how much is the productivity of land, how much, whether the farmer is earning enough to feed himself. They were not concerned with that. They only wanted to appropriate land revenue from the land, right? So that is why it led to famine of Bengal in 1770 and many millions kind of perished in that. So, if you have free time after your exam or probably after your mains exam, read this book by Tharoor. He wrote a very good book in which he highlighted how much misery and plunder the British rule in India did in 200 years. How many millions we say that Mao killed so many people, Stalin killed so many people. But in reality, the Churchill and the other PM and the viceroys have also been responsible for killing so many people in the name of famines because they were hardly doing anything. So this ends the first two, or how the British established themselves in India. This is not important for your present exam because they have not been asking questions on that. You have other things also in this chapter which you must read, and this is Anglo-Maratha War, Anglo-Mysore War, Carnatic War. You can read it very briefly. So I'll start with the next chapter, which is Economy of British India. Or I'll start with land, the revenue system in the British India. So we start with the land revenue system in the British India. So as we know that there were three kinds of land revenue system in the British India. They were permanent settlement, secondly it was Rothwari system, and thirdly it was Mahalwari. So these three systems were introduced in India. The first system which was introduced in India was a system of permanent settlement. So first of all, I'll deal with trivial details on which a question could be asked in the exam. So in the permanent settlement system, it was established by Lord Cornwallis, and it was in Bengal and Bihar. These are things which you should remember for your exam. They could ask the reason, they could change the reason, which areas Mahalwari system was there, which area permanent settlement was there. So it was there in Bengal and Bihar. And what were the key features of the system? So under this, the land revenue was fixed permanently. So if the land revenue from the land was 150 rupees, it was fixed till entity, right? So land revenue was fixed. And secondly, the British completely absolved themselves from the responsibility of revenue collection. They kind of outsourced it to the what you call as Jamidar or landlords. So it was, the village used to be, one village or two, three villages used to be given to this Jamidar, and this Jamidar he was given the responsibility for tax collection. He was said that as long as you are giving us the tax, as long as you are submitting the tax in the imperial treasury, you are the owner of this land, right? So out of the total revenue, 10/11 used to be shared with the British, and 1/11 the Jamidar used to keep with himself. And the British have told the Jamidar that we would demand only that much. So they would have already earlier told them that from this piece of land we demand only rupees 300. So if you can appropriate rupees 600, everything above rupees 300 will be yours. So this gave an incentive to the Jamidar to appropriate, to exploit the tenants more, because they thought that because the Jamidar thought that if I'll exploit more, I will get more money to keep it myself, because I have to share most of the money with the British themselves. Now there was also this sunset clause. This would mean that if the Zamindar would not submit the land revenue on the evening of this particular date, then his land would be transferred to some other person or some other Zamindar. So this was known as sunset clause. Next we have is the right of the Jamindar over the land. So his right could be categorized into three categories. First was that his right was alienable, which means till he submits the land revenue, he is the owner of land, but if he does not submit it, his land is, or his control over land would be transferred to some other person. Second was that it was rentable, which means that the Jamidar could further outsource the work of revenue collection to some smaller Jamidar. So there was this chain of intermediaries which were there. These big Jamidars, they used to enjoy this urban life and they were called as absentee landlords. And third was heritable, which means it was herited from one generation to another. When we talk of farmers, the farmers were of two kinds. First was tenants at will, and second was occupancy tenants. So when we talk in a modern sense, these could be called as Dalits. And these were basically OBCs, you can say Yadavs, Kurmis, Koiris, all these middle caste, they were generally these occupancy tenants because they were permanent tenants. They were permanent tenants, they had all these documents that they have been doing work in this field from last so many years. Therefore, when land reforms happened in post-independent India, all the land from these upper castes, it got transferred into these OBCs because they were having these documents. And that is why they became so much economically rich, they became so much socially powerful, they became so much politically powerful. When we talk of Dalits, they were somehow landless laborers. They were people who could be, and these people also had this term security. They cannot be evicted at will. These people are landless laborers. They were at the will of the Jamidar, and any time the Jamidar can throw them out. So after land reforms, and since they did not have any document with themselves, they did not got the land. So even after 70 years, 73% of Dalits are landless. That is the reason behind that. So next we deal with is why was the British introduced that? So the British introduced that for many reasons. Firstly, it was very time consuming and it was very administratively inconvenient for them to undertake the job of revenue collection because they did not had much connection with the hinterland. They were not very much, they were not expert in that. So therefore they thought that it's better to appoint an Indian Jamidar to do this job and we focus on other areas. So first reason was that. Second reason was that they wanted that if we give these Jamidars this right, they would become our strong allies because some of these Jamidars were natural leaders of the people. The Britishers thought that. And since they were natural leaders of the people, they had much say over the people. And since they had much say over the people, their existence depends upon us because we have given them the power. Therefore, they would be our strongest allies, and through them we would rule over the people or the masses of India. So they thought that this would create a strong political ally in the hinterland of India. Thirdly, they thought that since they have already told the Zamindar that we would be taking district's revenue and any revenue which you could appropriate over that, it will be all yours, right? So they thought that this would incentivize the Jamindar to invest on the land, and that would increase the productivity of the land, and that would increase the income of the people. And since that would increase the income of the people, they would buy the British goods, right? So it would create a market for the British goods. So what really happened? This was what was expected of it, but what really happened? So they thought that that the Jamidars would invest in the land, but it did not happen because Jamidar was hardly interested in that. He was absentee landlord. He had outsourced his job to 3, 4, 6, 7, 8 layers of small jamidars, all of them tried their best to squeeze the peasant to the maximum, and the actual land revenue was more or less, it was around 70 to 80%. Therefore, the peasant was left with nothing. Therefore, it created misery in the interlands of India. It led to massive famines, regular famines. It led to indebtedness because the farmer had to pay the land revenue, and for that he had to take some loan, which led to indebtedness. It also did not create political allies for the British because these jamidars were evicted very frequently for their non-repayment of the land revenue, and when they used to be evicted, they became the strongest enemies of the British Empire. So it did not achieve any purpose, and plus the Britishers were also losing the revenue because they had fixed it for the eternity. So that is why, the Britishers thought that they would not extend the system to the other parts of India. So therefore, a new system called as Rotwari system was introduced in the other areas which became under the rule of the East India Company. And these other areas were Madras, Bombay and Assam. And in this other area, Rotwari system was introduced. So who introduced this Rotwari? It was introduced by Sir Thomas Munro. I think a question was asked last year on that. And where was it introduced? It was introduced in Madras, Bombay and Assam. So all these three areas introduced this Rotwari system. So what were the reasons behind that? Why was the Rotwari system introduced? So there were a number of reasons behind that. Firstly, the failure of permanent settlement was the most important reason behind this. So the British government did not, first of all, they did not got the adequate revenue because the revenue was fixed till eternity. It created havoc in the countryside of India. It led to a number of anguished jamidars who were evicted. So therefore, they thought that they would not extend the system to the other parts of the country. Secondly, at that time, there was this liberal thought, what we call as utilitarian thought, that was emerging in the British areas. That was the age of Macaulay, who was considered very liberal, the age of other people, and they were very liberal, and therefore they thought that permanent settlement system was very exploitative. Therefore, they thought that it's better to give or to adopt a more liberal system in India. Thirdly, the Britishers under this system, the Britishers did not have to share the revenue with these jamidar because here it was direct. The British would directly collect it from the farmer. So third motive was because they did not wanted to share the land revenue with anyone. Fourthly, in the Bengal, in the Bihar area, we had this feudal system for last 300-400 years. But in new areas like Bombay, like Madras, you did not have this kind of feudal structure. Therefore, it was not feasible for them to have or to adopt jamindari system in that area. Therefore, they required a new system of Rotwari. And fifthly, in the permanent settlement area, because of exploitative system, number of agrarian revolts were taking place. So they thought that more liberal system would prevent these agrarian revolts. And sixthly, They thought that under this system, since it's more liberal, it would increase the income of the farmers and therefore they would become the market for the, or these areas would become market for the British goods. So what were the features of Rothwari system? So under this, there was no middleman. The state would directly collect land revenue from the peasant, and the farmers had control over the. He was the owner of the land till the time he pays the tax. So till the time he pays the tax and all the dues, he has the right to sell the land. He has the right to outsource the land to somebody else. He has total control over the land. Thirdly, this also had this feature of patta and kabuliyat, which means that firstly, under the system, the land revenue was decided on the basis of sample method or sample survey. And after the sample survey was conducted, and after the sample survey, it was expected this land would give that much of this land is of that much productivity, and therefore that much amount of land revenue will have to be collected from this land. After that, the farmer was given an option to accept this terms and conditions. He can choose to also refuse that condition. In that, when we talk of consequences, well, it was expected that this system would bring prosperity in the land of India, but it did not do that because of number of factors. Firstly, farmers had to pay revenue even during the droughts. If they did not pay revenue, they were evicted. Secondly, because of errors in sample collection, the actual land revenue which the farmers had to pay was around 60 to 70%, which was very huge, right? 60 to 70% land revenue is very huge. So to pay that land revenue, the farmers used to take money from these money lenders. And when the crop used to fail during the season of poor monsoon, the land used to get transferred from that farmer to these money lenders. So it created a new kind of jamidar. These money lenders had no interest in farming. They became new kind of jamidars. Right? They used to control over the land, and the farmer, after kind of selling their land to money lender, he used to work in his own land as a simple tenant, like they used to do in the permanent settlement areas. So this was this was creating a lot of havoc. Also, since the government insisted on cash revenue, ultimately it forced the farmers to produce cash crops rather than producing food crops, because they thought that with cash crops they can earn more. They could earn more money, and with that more money they would be able to pay the land revenue. Therefore, it led to the problem of regular famines in Rothwari area. And by the way, Roths means farmers. So Rothwari is someone where you have direct connection between farmer and the state. Right? So somehow this system also failed to bring peace and prosperity to the farmers. Third we have is Mahalwari system. Mahalwari. So first of all, this Mahalwali system was introduced by Mackenzie, and it was introduced during the reign of Lord William Bentinck. So you have to remember these things very, very carefully. Where was it introduced? It was introduced in Gangetic Valley, technically in Agra, in Awadh, in some parts of MP. That time it was called as Central Province, in Punjab, and Northwest Province. So it was introduced in all these areas. And what is Mahal? Mahal is means a small revenue assessment unit, or could be called as a village. So how was this different from the other features or the other system? So in this, the unit of assessment was not the household, it was the village. So naturally, what happened was that the East India Company, what it used to do, it used to assess that this X village will have to pay us 1000 rupees as land revenue. Now, next, the Lambardar, or the what you call as village hitman, he was responsible for collecting these 1000 rupees and paying it to the British government. So every household, based on the amount of land they have, the kind of land they have, used to contribute to this share, and ultimately this 1000 rupees was paid by Lambardar to the British. That is how it worked. Next we have is consequences of Mahalwali system. So generally the Mahalwali areas are very fertile areas, and because of very high fertility, the average rate charge or average land revenue charge was 80 to 90%, and this again led to pauperization of the peasantry. Also, because of joint family system, with every generation there was this division of the land, and this division of land adversely affected the economies of scale. It also adversely affected the fertility, and therefore it worsened the condition of the farmers. Also, just like the Rothwari system, here also the British government demanded the revenue to be paid in cash. And since it had to be paid in cash, the farmers had to borrow the money from the money lenders, and therefore it also increased, or it also led to the problem of indebtedness among the farmers. So, one fact I need to tell you, that the maximum area in India under the British India was in the permanent settlement area. After that, it was in Rothwari settlement, and after that, it was in Mahalwari system. So, maximum area in India was under permanent settlement. This was bought by Cornwallis, this was Munro, and this was by Mackenzie. So this ends this topic. Next we will move to is the British economic policy for India. So we have four stages of policy or the economic policy of British India. The first stage was the stage of mercantilism or merchant capital. Second stage was the stage of merchant capital with political power. Third stage was the age of industrial capitalism, and the fourth stage was the stage of financial capitalism. So we'll discuss each stage very in a very detailed way. So the first stage was the stage of merchant capitalism, or what you call as mercantilism. Mercantilism is the ideology where you try to increase the benefit of your country by ensuring that there is inflow of bullions and the gold in your country. So when the British came to India, they came as a traders, right? They came as a traders because Indian made textile goods were in great demand in Southeast Asia and in Europe. So they came to India in 1600s, and till 1757, this age was called as the age of merchant capital or mercantilism, where the Indians, or where they used to trade from India, they used to export these textile goods from India, and in return they used to brought gold and silver or other bullions. So naturally, the Indian rulers liked it because they were getting access to the bullions. Therefore, they gave more and more exemptions to the Britishers. They gave them what they call as free trade. They abolished all duties from this because they were also making money out of it, right? That is why they were not willing to hurt or to somehow antagonize these East India Company. But things changed in 1757 because in 1757 the East India Company also got limited political power because they defeated the Nawab in the Battle of Plassey, and the new Nawab was somehow under the control of the Britishers. And after Battle of Buxar, they became the real masters of Bengal. So therefore, after 1765, the second phase started, which was the phase of merchant capital with political power. And from this stage, the drain of Indian wealth started. See, so how was the drain happening? See, what was the British doing? They got the Diwani rights, right? From the Shah Alam. So from that Diwani rights, they were getting access to the Indian land revenue. From that land revenue, they were buying goods for exports. So because they also had political power, they were forcing these handicraftsmen to sell them the good very cheap, right? And that good, they used to export that good to Europe. So ultimately, India was getting nothing in return to the export which it is doing to the Europe, because the East India Company was buying that export from the Indian land revenue itself. See, when these politicians say that India was was ruled by outsiders for 1000 years. They were ruled by the Muslim rulers who were looters, who looted Indian money. But in reality, anyone, whether it's Delhi Sultanate, whether it's Khalji, whether it's Tughlaqs, whether it's Mughal, all of them came as an invader, but they somehow stayed in India, right? So any mismanagement they are doing, they were spending the money inside India. Even if you could call Taj Mahal as what you call as waste of taxpayers' money, but somehow the creation of Taj Mahal gave employment to so many people for 2 decades. So anything they do, they at least were spending the money in India. It was somehow giving employment to the Indians. It was somehow giving, it was staying in India. But the Britishers were the first people who did not make India as their home. They were always foreigners. Their only concern was that to earn money in India and send that money to Britain. So therefore, they were doing this. They were buying the exports, or they were buying this handicraft from the land revenue which they have got access to and selling that to Britain. We were getting nothing in return. Third phase started in early 19th century. And that phase was called as the phase of industrial capitalism, or phase of free trade. So by this time, industrial revolution has happened in Britain. So the British machine-made goods were they were more efficient and they were more cheaper, right? But these goods required raw material. So in the second phase, they were exporting the proper textile goods, or proper what you call as sophisticated textile goods to Britain. But in the third phase, their interest did not lie in selling these handicraft goods to Britain, because they were in direct competition with the British mill-made goods. Therefore, they thought that rather than exporting these full-made handicraft goods, we should sell or we should send these raw materials to the Britain, because these raw materials were required by the British industry. So they launched this process of free trade, where somehow, and this free trade was unequal, because when Indian handicraft good used to go to Britain, they used to impose all kinds of duties. But when the British exports used to come, or when the British machine-made textile good used to come to India, there was no duties charged on that. It was completely free. And since these machine-made goods were more they were more better and they were more inexpensive, therefore they replaced the Indian handicrafts goods. And that led to the process what we call as deindustrialization of India. So a lot of British apologists say that, see, we were not doing anything wrong. We were actually, because your industry was inefficient and therefore somehow it will have to be replaced by machine-made goods. It was the law of nature. But in reality, if India would have been ruled by someone who wanted to do good for India, then he would have done what? He would have first give protection to the Indian industries, and with this protection, it would try to develop modern industries in India. And when this protection and when these modern industries were able, or when they were made strong enough to kind of compete with these British-made industries, only then it used to allow free trade. But the Indian or the British rulers in India, from day one, they started with free trade. And it was free trade between two unequal economies, right? So somehow India was deindustrialized, and India became an agriculture. India transformed itself from the industrial powerhouse of the world to an agricultural appendage of an industrial economy, right? So we got transformed from industrial powerhouse, because in 1700, 25% of world's manufacturing was being done in India. So we transformed from industrial powerhouse to agricultural appendage of industrial Britain.
Right? This is somehow, I mean, you should read that book by Tharu. That is such, many of your doubts will get clear. Third is, or the fourth phase, is the phase of financial capital. So in this phase, these industries replace the finance. So all these financiers used to invest in these railways and all these areas, and they used to get interest from that investment, and that interest was paid from Indian money, and therefore there was drain of money from India to Britain. So next thing we will discuss is the drain theory, because if you don't understand drain theory, then you won't understand this thing also. So this drain theory, what do we mean by drain? What do we mean by economic drain? So this theory was popularized by Dadabhai Naoroji under his book Poverty and Un-British Rule in India. He said that there is massive transfer of resources and wealth from India to England without providing any equivalent return. And this transfer of resources is leading to lack of savings and investment in India. Because for any economy to grow, you require savings and investment. Though economy can grow without saving and investment, but in India, all the saving which we used to do, that was being appropriated to Britain, and this was the cause of misery and poverty of India. And he called it un-British because he was the believer that British were, it's a democracy, it's a parliamentary democracy, it's a country of liberty, it's a country of fraternity, and therefore it's very un-British of them that the kind of addition they are doing in India. Right? He had this, he was a moderate, so he had faith in the goodwill of the British Empire. I mean, many economists further consolidated this theory, and this includes R.C. Dutt, M.J. Ranade, all these people somehow, they also worked in this theory. So, what was the concept of economic drain? I mean, what did it, or what were the components of economic drain? That is very important for your exam. Because a question could be asked on kind of question that which of the following are part of home charges, which used to be part. A question could be asked on that lines. So there were number of components of economic drain. First component was home charges. And what does the home charges used to contain? So home charges used to contain following things. Firstly, in simple terms, home charges was basically the expenditure which the Secretary of State used to do in London on behalf of Indian administration in India. So it was the expenditure done by Secretary of State in Britain, or Secretary of State to India in Britain for running administration in India. So any expenditure which was done on Secretary of State was part of home charges. So home charges had following kind of components. Firstly, the dividends paid to the shareholders of East India Company. Secondly, interest on public debt raised abroad. Thirdly, civil and military charges. So civil charges would include payments towards pension of British officers in civil and military department in India, expenses on India office establishment in Britain, payments to the Britain War Office. All these charges were solely because of India's subjugation to the British rule. And fourthly, stores purchases in England. So this store purchases in England mean that the stores, the procurement which the Secretary of State used to do in England for running India's administration is also part of, or it is also because of India's subjugation to the British rule. Second area or the second component of economic drain was use of Indian Army for non-Indian purposes. So Indian Army was used for fighting wars in Africa, for fighting wars in other places of Asia, and we had to pay, or the people of India had to pay for that. And we were not party to it. I mean, we are not interested in it, but because of being subjugated to the British rule, we had to have this expenditure. And thirdly, unrequited exports. This is what I have discussed when I was discussing this phase of merchant capital with political power. Because we, till the end of the British rule, India always had a balance of payment surplus, which means that we were exporting more and we were importing more, importing less, and which was because we were exporting a lot of things to Britain, but we were not getting anything in return, which means that somehow the resources were being drained out from India to Britain. So this is a fact which you need to understand, that we were always having balance of payment surplus during the British rule in India. So what were the consequences of economic drain? So as we discussed earlier, it somehow prevented investment in India, it somehow prevented modernization and industrialization of India. It was the reason because of massive poverty in India. So this ends the economic drain theory. Let's move to the next topic, which is commercialization of agriculture. So, before the arrival of British in India, agriculture in India was not done for making profits. It was basically in village area we have this Jajbani system, where one used to do something. He used to crop he used to crop rice. Somebody else used to kind of crop wheat. The guy who used to crop rice, he used to kind of exchange that for wheat. We were mostly a self-sufficient economy, and the farmers were not producing for market. They were producing for themselves. But when the British came, we witnessed this commercialization of agriculture where the farmers were not, they were not doing crops, or they are not sowing crops for their own kind of consumption. They were doing it for the market, for earning profit. And that process is known as commercialization of agriculture. So what were the factors which were responsible for that? So firstly, the free trade policy of the Britain and economic colonization of India as a raw material supplier. Because you know that Britain industries were, or their mills were getting feeded, but they were running on the supply of raw materials from India. Therefore, industrial revolution or the sustenance of industrial revolution in Britain was dependent on adequate supply of raw materials from India. Therefore, they tried to promote commercialization of agriculture. They forced the farmers to grow cash crops, and especially those crops which the British industries needed. Right? So reason was economic colonization of India. Second factor was that cash-based economy coupled with huge land revenue demand. So India, as you know, they were demanding a large amount of land revenue, and in Rothwari and Mahalwari they were demanding in cash. Therefore, the farmers had no option to grow cash crops to earn money, right, or to pay the land revenue. This also led to the commercialization of agriculture. Thirdly, development of means of transports like railways and Suez Canal. Because through this, the raw materials could be easily exported to Britain and other parts of Europe. Fourthly, breakdown of self-sufficiency of villages, and Indian economy became closely interlinked with the international markets. So we need to, some of the crops we need to grow because of the British interest, because opium we need to grow because we have to balance the trade with China, because China was exporting us many things and we had nothing to export to them. So British thought that let's grow opium and let's balance the trade with selling opium. So we, or the East India Company, forcefully sold opium to the Chinese and tried to spoil a generation of Chinese into opium addicts, right? And that is why they kind of resisted, and that is how we had that opium wars. Next we have is why coercive practice of the British. So many farmers who were not willing to grow cash crops were forced to grow that by British plantation agents. So the condition was very bad in indigo farmers, because when the indigo used to be grown in an area, that land used to get unfertile for any kind of other crops. If the farmers were not willing to grow indigo in their land, but somehow the British forced them to grow indigo. Next we have is pattern of commercialization of agriculture in India. So it was a coercive process, and therefore it was exploitative, because the farmers were not willing by themselves to kind of grow these or to grow these cash crops. It was a forced process. They were being grown these crops because of forced requirements. Therefore, the benefits of this never reach to the farmers, because when your system is linked with the international market, then sometimes it's fine. Sometimes when the price of a crop falls, the farmers face the brunt. But the problem was that when the price of the crop used to be very high, even then the farmers does not used to get benefit, because it was the middleman in between who used to appropriate or the benefits of the higher price. Therefore, the farmers' condition became worsened after this. Secondly, it also led to indebtedness problem in India, because to grow these cash crops, you require large inputs. It's not very easy to grow them, it is costly. And to buy these inputs, these farmers used to go to these money lenders and ask for the loan. And with loan, they used to get indebted, and this increased the farmers' suicide also. Thirdly, the crops which were grown were kept, or they were grown keeping the European needs in mind. So we grew cotton because of American Civil War, and there was lack of supply from cotton from America to Britain, right? That increased the price in Britain. But after the war was normalized, the price again crashed. And when the price crashed, the British refused to kind of reduce the land revenue, and that is why we had this cotton, or this Deccan riot in 1870, right? So this was something. Even the indigo we were growing because we had to feed these needs of the dyeing industry. Opium we are growing because we had to balance the trade with China. So everything the process was completely done for European interests, and that is why we or our farmers could not benefit from that. And fourthly, it only led to regional development. It increased the regional disparity in India, because there were only some centers which were suitable for growing cash crops, and therefore it led to a regional development of only some centers. And fifthly, it lead to famines. Because more and more farmers were growing cash crops, and therefore they were neglecting food crops. And without food you cannot sustain, right? So that led to a shortage of food, and that ultimately led to regular famines after every few years. And finally, it led to revolts and growth of nationalism, because ultimately when the farmers are oppressed, they will definitely be more attracted towards nationalism or towards revolt. Next we have is railways. So when we talk of railways, what were the factors which were responsible for the development of railways? So firstly, free traders and their influence. See, at that time, the Britishers or a lot of people in Britain, they had earned a lot of money. But whenever the investment opportunities in Europe was very limited, right? They were not getting good returns for their investment. The interest rate was very less, 0.5 plus 0.6%. Therefore, they were looking for a market where they could use their saved money. They were looking for a market where they could get good rate of return, and they thought that railway is a very good area, because in railway they had this provision of guaranteed return of 5%. Therefore, they were all willing to invest in railways in India, where they thought that they could earn a very significant higher rate of return than the other investments in Europe. Secondly, it was good for European or British iron and steel industries. So, as you know that development of railways require large amount of iron and steel. Therefore, the British iron and steel industries were also pressurizing the government to start building railway lines because they thought that will give a boost to demand or that would give a boost to demand of iron and steel from Britain. Thirdly, it was also the East India Company thought that if railways would be built, that would lead to more successful and better economic exploitation of India. So they thought that that would lead to faster connection of areas of raw material with the port, and that will increase the flow of raw materials from India to Britain. Secondly, through railways, the British manufactured goods, they would reach to the more hinterland areas of India also, and that would give boost to the British industry. Fourthly, for better mobilization of troops, because India, as you know, Indian subcontinent was a very large entity, and they thought that if there is any revolt in any place, other means of transport are very slow. Therefore, they thought that railways would be it would lead to faster mobilization of troops, and that would lead to better control of British over the Indian areas. So, what were the features of railway development in India? CAPF 2015, a question was asked on that, so a question could be expected on it anytime. So, firstly, from 1850 to 1869, railway in India was developed as a private entity, or it was developed with private capital. And these private players were given guaranteed rate of return, which was 5%. However, in 1869, it was found that very slow or very few lines have been developed in India, and the target was, the target was very slow. Therefore, in 1869, railways was being developed, or it was being built as a state enterprise. So, from 1869 to 1880, it was developed as a state enterprise, and that led to significant spread of railway lines in India. Finally, from 1880 from 1880 onwards, both private and public capital was used. Other significant feature was that all capital which was invested in railways was the European. Secondly, Indian capital or not just European, all capital were English. Indian capital and other European capital was not allowed to invest in the railways. Also, guaranteed rate of cost led to inefficiencies, because now that the private players thought that we will get 5%, whether we build it or we build it slowly or we miss the target. Therefore, that also costed a big amount on India's treasury, because we were giving, Indians were paying for the inefficiencies of the private British companies. Also, railway was designed to keep colonial interest in mind. Therefore, only the internal markets were connected with ports and not with internal cities. So, Bhopal and Jabalpur were not connected, or Agra or Delhi is not connected, but Agra and Mumbai was connected because Agra was the center of indigo and Mumbai was a port. So the lines which were built was built solely to cater the British interest. There was hardly any concern for the Indian interest. Last thing we deal with is the decline of Indian handicrafts. So, what were the factors which were responsible for that? So, firstly, it was the free trade policy which completely made our Indian handicrafts unsustainable because they could not compete with the machine-made British good. Secondly, the policy of or the misuse of politics instituted power by the Europeans. So, because they used to force the artisans to work for them at low wages, they used to pay less for the output and pay more for input, and they also used to force these artisans to reveal the trade secrets. So, Indian manufacturing became a unprofitable business because no artisan wanted to do that because he was getting very low pay, he was getting forced to reveal his secrets, and working conditions were very bad. Thirdly, all the policy of annexation of Indian states also played a major role in that because Indian states were big patrons of these handicrafts. So once they lost the political power, these artisans were left with no demand. And lastly, westernization of India. So westernization of India has led or has forced the middle class to adopt Western clothes. And since they were adopting Western clothes, they were only buying the British-made clothes. So this ends the first lecture on history static. In the next lecture, we will be discussing the other topics. Thank you.